Good morning and welcome. It's about 9:30 in the morning. It's the 30th day of June. June gloom is heavy in the air, but that's okay because tomorrow's July 1st, which is July 4th weekend, so be careful. And of course that means, oh no, July fry. But it's worth it because August, September and October here, beautiful, perfect. It almost makes up for the rest of the year. Okay, so I made a video yesterday, which was a response to a video DM James put up where we were responding to a video another member of the shallow end of the 5e idiot pool put up a video talking about basically treating his players like shit and, how bullying your players is a great way to get engagements. And then if the players don't live up to the expectations, they'll be kicked to the curb or worse. And, I talked about how that was just pure game theorist bullshit straight out of the Forge. I also said Fate and Fudge in there, which was probably incorrect. I don't think Fudge had anything to do out of the Forge. Fate definitely has some influences from that whole game theory mentality. Apparently I got some of my dates wrong. Now, according to Aaron the Relentless, the Forge actually started producing articles around 1999. Now, my experience with this was my first encounter with what would eventually become that mentality was 84. And how, 84 is when I first met Keating and Balbo and Osser and was first introduced to the idea of storytelling, role-playing, rewarding role-playing, hero points, and game theory. But for them, it was not a negative thing. It was not about bullying. It was about rewarding players for thinking outside of the box and rewarding players for not just, sheet playing, actually interacting with the world. And there was, this hero point system, which I think came out of RuneQuest. At least I seem to remember them talking about it. 84 is a long time ago and I'm old and I don't remember exactly, but I do know that this was sort of the origins, 84. And around 86, World of Darkness. Balbo had left. I don't know if Balbo had anything to do with World of Darkness, but there was a lot of the role storyteller ideas in there. And then 89, I left college, and so 90, 92, 93, early 90s is when I first ran into the game theorists, the Solomon and those guys, and sitting at the table and the idea of player points. And the guy talked about how he picked up player points from New York and how he took them, brought them to California and turned them into the whole beginning ideas of his system and the whole beginning of his idea of rewarding players by punishing them players. He had this very much, game theorist idea that if you treat your players like shit, but dangle this reward just out of their reach, they will continue to excel in an attempt to get the treat. It was very reverse Pavlovian. Ding, ding, ding. Rewards for reacting to negative attention. The more he treated you like shit, the more people wanted to feed into his cult of personality. It was very abusive, and I have to admit, I was in a bad place in the 90s. I fell for it, hook, like, and sinker. There's 2, 3, 4 months of my life where I was doing anything I could to get that cookie. And then I realized, because I was a victim of mental and emotional abuse in the past, that this game theory shit was just abuse. It was just bullying. This idea you have to jump through hoops to get the cookie and nothing you do is ever good enough. And there's always the threat looming, that if you don't live up, your seat will be taken. You could, and somebody said, you could drive 4, 5, 6 hours to get to Solomon's game, and Solomon could just say, no, you're not sitting at the table today. Why don't you just hang out and we might feed you in, I remember taking a cab, which cost me almost $100 to get to Solomon's game, getting in there and then just sitting for 3 hours waiting for my chance to play. And then, I had to work the next day. So I'm like, fuck this. And, the guy who said he was going to give me a ride home told me to go fuck myself because he wanted to still play. So I had to spend almost another $100 to get a cab back. And then Solomon calls me up the next day while I'm at work and I'm not supposed to take personal calls. And he's like, do you want to come play? And I'm like, no, I'm at work. And he's like, well, tell him you're sick. I want you to come play right now. And I'm like, no, fuck that. And I hung up on him. And that was like the end of my experience with that. But that was about the time that people started talking about the Forge. And you went onto the Forge and you saw this game theory stuff. And you saw this. And, Willis was posting almost every day. Consulman was posting almost every day. These other guys who are sitting at Solomon's table were talking about the Forge, talking about game theory, talking about the, how Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons was wrong. It was stupid. And anybody who played D&D was wrong. Their way was the best. I talked about this reverse psychology. Talked about the World of Darkness storyteller rewarding stuff. But, their stuff was all about punishing stuff. This is like early, serious, sick shit, mid 90s. So this is before or during, this is before Wizards of the Coast. So this is D&D, AD&D, D&D 3.3. It just come out, fourth wasn't out yet. I don't know if it was exactly around 3.3 came out, or I think was closer to 3.5. So, it was somewhere in the transition. I can't remember exact dates. I mean, it was 93, 94, I want to say, when I first started gaming with the Solomon crew. And then 95 is when I was like, fuck this. And that was probably about the last time I had any interaction with these guys, and then 2002 is when I moved up north to Site A here in Costa Rica. And I brought the idea of player points with me because, Solomon had stolen the player point idea and turned it into a bad thing. But the math was interesting and it worked. And I tried it, and it didn't have legs. A lot of people tried to interact it, but, there was other systems that already had by then the idea of hero points, player points, action points, as ways to reward that was better. And so, other people were using it. It had sort of spread. And I was like, whatever. If you ever find a copy of my short-lived first attempt at producing a role-playing game, there's a long section on the whole idea of player points and hero points and build points. But yeah, it was mostly just self-indulgent crap that I, wrote back then. Basically the mentality is punish your players, treat them like shit, dangle this, team A, team B over their heads. That was all early Forge, early Solomon, early game theory, and that was all stolen from Storyteller and the stuff Balbo and Keating had come up with, but they'd corrupted it and they turned it into something horrible and ugly. They turned it in basically a way to create this cult-like status of abuse. He would sit people down and he would abuse them mentally and emotionally for hours, and they would lap it up because he would dangle these, prizes. Live up to my expectation. But if you don't, I can kick you to the curb, And I wasn't the only one who would drove 3, 4, 5 hours. I remember one time when he played a married couple against each other. And by the end of the night, they were arguing, and then the husband just left the wife there because because he manipulated them, because he wanted to fuck the wife, So thankfully, that was the last I ever heard of it until GM James posted this video from our favorite 5e idiot yesterday, and everything he was saying was like, dude, I'd heard this before. This was all Solomon bullshit from the, 90s. This was all game theorists. This was all that ugliness of just, here's a guy saying, I love 5e. I love Wizards of the Coast. But I want to run a game that goes against everything Wizards of the Coast is about, everything against 5e is about, everything that goes against everything that a progressive, healthy gaming table is about. Instead, I want to treat my players like shit. I want to punish them for being at my table. I want to tell them, if you don't live up to this expectation, I'm kicking you to the curb and replacing you with another scrub. All right? And if you're one of the scrubs, if you're one of the B team, well, you can sit and watch if you want, but I'm not going to invite you to the table. You got to earn it. And the only way you're going to earn it is because you got to wait for one of these guys to fuck up, and then I might let you sit there. That's just bullying on it and abuse on its worst stuff. And for the guy to say all this shit and then also say, oh, but I love the community of 5e and I love everything Wizards of the Coast, is like, dude, have you read 5th edition? Nothing in what you're saying has anything to do with 5th edition. And then to play the, oh, this is what Gygax wanted. No, that is not what Gygax wanted. Gygax did not want players to feel like shit at the table. Gygax wanted people to feel welcome at the table. Everything I read about Gygax is about how he was a gamer, how he wanted you to acknowledge there were other games and wanted people to feel comfortable at the table playing. So yes, some of my dates might be wrong, and some of my whatever might be wrong, and I think I made the mistake of comparing the Forge to Fate and the Fudge. Fudge was just a GURPS ripoff. Fate, I've talked about my weird experience with Fate, and it was, it reminded me a lot of that same thing. Like you had to earn your place. And like if you've heard my Fate story, it was like the DM refused to explain anything to me. Like I had to fight and earn to get an explanation. But basically it's just a guy, if you break it down to the video DM James was talking about, it's just a guy saying, I fucking hate my players. I'm going to treat them like shit. I'm going to bully them, and they're going to like it. They're going to respond. They're going to respond to me. They're going to give me the attention I need to fill my addiction. And how am I going to get that attention? By treating them like shit, because they're going to respond to that negative attention. They're going to want to jump through that hoop so much. And yeah, that's again, that's early 90s bullshit. That's not 5e. That's not Wizards of the Coast. That's, the same shit that like the Bro SR talks about and these elite game master talks about. And, that's all out of the darkest corner of the worst aspect of the, OGL, OSR, 90s stuff. And that all comes out of that game theory, Forge nonsense of just, permission to treat your players like shit because they will jump through hoops to get your attention. So yeah, if I make mistakes, I'm the first to point them out. So yeah, I got some of the dates wrong. I probably got some of the names wrong. Obviously, I have a little bit more personal experience than some people. Some people only know what they've read about it, which is fine. I mean, if you weren't there, you can't really understand what it is that those people put through. And if you weren't there when it was, Balbo and Keating were first coming up with the idea, and I don't even think it's an original idea because they said they got it from another game. I think RuneQuest, but I'm not sure. We're talking 1984, 85, so I can't even remember, yesterday, much less 84, 85. But, it was never a negative thing until it became a negative thing. And when it became a negative thing, it was like the worst possible thing you could imagine. I mean, the last place you expect anybody to feel bullied is at a gaming table, because gaming was always about, I don't care who you are, just sit down and let's play, and I'm going to treat you well as long as you don't fuck with my game, So, yeah, that's my personal experience with that. That's my personal reaction to the video DM James and I were talking about. There's a link down below if you want to see the video we're talking about. If I got dates wrong, I'm sorry. I can only base it upon my experience. And yeah, I'm sure I messed up and made some mistakes the other day, but I'm only human, or tuna. And so if I apologize if I made mistakes, and again, this is just my personal experience with that mentality and how everything I heard in that video yesterday was just like, dude, I've heard this before. I've literally lived through this, and it's awful, and it's abusive. And there is something very wrong with anybody who is practicing that or putting up with that. And if you're dealing with bullying, please, whether it be at the gaming table, at your school, at your workplace, reach out, talk to someone. And as always, if you're dealing with mental and emotional health issues, please seek out professionals. D&D is not therapy. And if a DM is treating you like shit and you think that's therapeutic, no, please reach out to a mental health individual. Please talk to somebody, and don't let anybody bully you, especially at a game of Dungeons and Dragons. All right, that's all I've got to say on that. I'll talk to you later. Have a great day. I'm the OG GM. I hope you appreciate the nonsense that's coming out of my mouth. If you do, consider subscribing. Till then, see you.